body, mind, and soul in the upright position. We hope you enjoy the ride.
Welcome to WAYSPACE. This is it. Here we are. Let's be here now. Whew. Wow, we made it. So this is episode 3. I'm calling this episode the Call to Adventure for several reasons that I'll get into. But before that, I got to notice that I'm feeling like the energy of recording a podcast now that the first episode is out. So as I'm recording this, I released the first episode like a couple days ago. So I guess there's a little bit of a lag of when these are going to come out, but that's just because of the way it gets distributed and all that stuff. But yo, wow. I mean, just from my friends and like people that have listened to it so far, telling me what they think about it, like it's not like this is the kind of podcast where it's like my music, where it's stuff that I make and then my friends have already heard it when it comes out. This is like first heard by my friends too when it comes out. So to know that it's like touched people in any kind of a way has been, whoo, it's just like a lot. You know what I mean? I it's hard to say exactly, but if you make music, it's like, you know, when some people listen to your music for the first time and they're telling you what it's like, and you kind of just carry that energetic support with you as you go on to basically do whatever it is you're going to do. So right now for me, I'm recording the 3rd episode of the podcast, and it's just, I'm feeling like oh shit, like here we are, like y'all see me on my boat and like we're going to sail, you know, like we're setting to sea and all that good shit. I don't know if I said that right, but it's fine. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I mean, with that being said, like going out to sea, that's kind of the theme of the episode basically is the call to adventure, the call to set sail when you've got your boat ready, the time where it's time to take that road trip, or you know, whatever it might be in your life. I mean, I have a whole host of ways that I'm going to talk about it, at least in my own life and what I'm dealing with right now. But yeah, how are you doing? What are you doing right now, this second? Are you just listening to the podcast by itself? Are you taking a walk as you listen to it? I love listening to podcasts as I take walks. Are you driving right now? Are you cooking for yourself? I hope that with whatever you're doing, it is fulfilling to you and gives you a sense of peace rather than making you feel all jumbled up inside. I know there are things in my life that make me feel all jumbled up, like I've got too much going on. Even things that are meant to bring peace, you know? I think a lot of the time it's the intention we bring to them and how we approach them. And that's kind of related to sort of how I'm feeling about the call to adventure too. That being said, though, in terms of the podcast, I'm basically going to just continue with this, continue the way I'm going, continue talking about what I'm experiencing. As I said in the first episode, experiencing all over you, and you can experience all over me. And yeah, if you have questions, or like, you know, maybe it's not a question where it's like, hey, teacher, I have a question. You know, it doesn't have to be like that. I was listening to this one podcast called Ultra Culture. Yeah, that's what it's called. That's cool. I haven't said that out loud really, by this guy, Jason Louv, who's like a meditation teacher, spiritual teacher, mystic guy. And he talked about how the way this works is like when it comes to people who have podcasts or even actual teachers or whatever, just people that are putting out content or providing a service or something that is both for themselves and for others, that it's sort of like they've got their tent up and other people are just like coming to the tent. And I really resonated with that because I think it helps to formulate the way in which we can orient ourselves to this kind of stuff, that it's not this hierarchical thing. I mean, it can be, but that's more for fun than how it actually is. Because how it actually is I get reminded by people about the same things that I was beginning to learn like a year and a half ago or whatever it was. and find myself, wow, I could really benefit from this right now, you know? So there's not really much of a hierarchical sense. There can be a sense of like how long it's felt that you've been sort of travailing this path, but otherwise it really feels to me more like, you know, on these adventures we're taking, we're all just kind of taking our own adventure, and some of us have tents up, some of us have boats, some of us have whatever, and it's like, come hang out and we can compare notes, and if there's anything that is beneficial to you by listening to me or hanging out with me, then fuck yes, you know? So, that being said, I want to get into the kind of the protein of the podcast, so to speak, you know? I would say meat of the podcast, but really just the protein of the podcast. It's the call to adventure. You know, what is the call to adventure? And I'm speaking in any sense, but particularly in, at least for me, the mystical, spiritual, magical sense, which is, for me, it's been the most scary because it feels like it's the first time that the call to adventure is not somebody actually saying to me, Jack, you should come hang out, come play, come do this fun thing. But it's instead this inner part of me, this intuitive part of me that is inside that really yearns for the mystery and the adventure of what can happen, or just engaging with the curiosity and the sense of wonder. And am I willing to follow that sense of wonder? You know, are you willing to follow that sense of wonder? I know that there are things in all of our lives that have that sort of positionality to us, like they have a sense of orientation to us that we have spent time. This is like such a hero's journey thing, but it's like, you know, the hero is reluctant to the call to adventure. You know, the hero wouldn't be the hero of the stories we know if we didn't experience them saying, oh, I can't do that, to any call to adventure, to the willingness to open themselves to what they're being asked to do. And what's interesting is that in these shows, movies, narratives, books, whatever, these heroes they're dealing with the call to adventure from like people, like the Hercules type thing. You know, it's like other people need your help and you are an amazing hero and you can do it and you got to do it, and they reject it. And I think that the way it works, at least in my life, is that while I maybe have toyed with the idea that I could end up in positions like that, because all of us do, don't get me wrong, all of us do. We are all the heroes. We're all the hero. The thing that I'm thinking about with that is that it's going back to this aspect of it being an intuitive thing. So it's not so much that I'm being called to adventure by other people in like a way where I'm getting calls literally or texts that are like, Jack, you got to do this, although sometimes that happens, but that there's something inside of me that is opening to different things, and just there's like a sense of curiosity to, for example, different spiritual practices and rituals and meditative practices that I hadn't considered before and have been kind of, you know, knocking on my door every once in a while. And it's so hard to just be like, oh, no, that's not. I mean, actually, it's easy to do that, but it feels hard. You know, it feels difficult. It feels struggle-like. It feels like it's adding suffering by me closing myself off to my curiosity and my wonder. And this call to adventure is that curiosity and that wonder knocking on your door. And the most powerful of these is the one when it comes from inside. And I can tell that because I've had experiences like that in the last, my entire life, but particularly in the last 1.5 to 2 years of just feeling like, okay. What's going on? What's going on? What do I do here? So many choices. Where do I sail out to? What, you know, all that kind of stuff. And those feelings are sort of my fears and my caution around, you know, stumbling when you try to do that adventurous act, you know? And I think there are ways to kind of engage with this call to adventure that can be, you know, not so great. I mean, not, and I don't mean not so great like you shouldn't do them, but that they could end up with some suffering, you know? And I think I personally, I live my life in such a way that I'm in fear of added suffering. You know, it's like I started exposing myself to Buddhism at a pretty young age, but I didn't really understand it. Like this was probably when I was like, 10, 11. And I didn't really understand what I was looking at and stuff like that. And I mean, it kind of coincided with me going to ACT therapy, which is ACT is acceptance commitment therapy, is definitely informed by a similar attitude of mindfulness, which is informed by Buddhism and Buddhist meditative practices. And I sort of got to this point where I guess I got it kind of ingrained in me as sort of the religion I chose or the spiritual practice that I chose of being afraid of adding suffering, and so afraid of adding suffering that I would add suffering on the other end of things. I would be afraid to do things for fear of tripping or fear of messing up or fear of adding suffering to my life or somebody else's life, that I would hide inside of a shell. And I've sort of played this like push and pull relationship with suffering in that way, and adventure and caution, that I'm simultaneously occupying this role of being cautious, but I want so badly to release. It's why I want to share what I'm doing in my life on this podcast. It's why I feel like I can't hold things in. I got to share it with people. I got to like have somebody hear me. And I think the challenge of my spirituality and the beginning of my call to adventure, which I would say, like, I was kind of explaining this to my brother Sam, like the kind of stages of my mystical spiritual practice. I sort of had this long prologue, you could say, of like when I wasn't doing it consciously. And that was from, whenever I started to really start to suffer and accrue karma and feel my karma. And when I say karma, I think a lot of us kind of get now that karma is not like what goes around comes around. I mean, it is, but there's so much more to it than that. It's more of the life situation and predicaments that you're in, the stuff you inherit, the way in which you engage with the world, and how there's a lot of stuff that is not necessarily out of your control, but is with it. It's a very powerful force on one's life, particularly if you are not aware of it. Even when you are aware of it, it can have a lot of power, but particularly when you are not aware of it, it can be particularly like, like gunky. I think of karma a lot of the time as gunk, which that might be kind of a judgmental way to put it. I mean, gunk can be good too. It's fine. Gunk, you could be sitting in a whole pile of gunk and it'd be pretty comfy, I think a lot of us do that. I know I have. I know I still do in many ways. But where was I? Whoa. Okay, I was talking about karma, but so I was basically talking about kind of like this not wanting to add gunk into my life. I wanted to release the gunk and let it go and have it evaporate as quickly as possible. And that sort of is the straightening by fire element of like spiritual practice, spirituality, which is sort of you're burning off your karma as fast as you can so that you can basically live and then die with no attachments and nothing holding you back, so that you can basically live in bliss. I mean, there are a whole host of ways of why to do that. I mean, for me, getting rid of my gunk also is because I think I kind of, I really want, like, it's so funny, like I have desire still, I want to get rid of my desire so that I have no more desire, but I really want that. It's like such a oxymoronic way to go about it, which that's something that I've dealt with a lot within sort of spiritual practice and in the teachings that I've exposed myself to. But yeah, there's this sense that I'm afraid of going down that path because it feels like, oh no, is it going to be another dead end? Is this adventure that I'm going on going to just be another dead end? And what I've come to see is that any dead end that I've ever gotten to has never really been a dead end. The every single dead end or every single stopping point or whatever has always just turned into a block that, yes, it stops and the block can no longer move, but then I step on the block and I jump higher. That's kind of the the way that it works. Because, it's like killing a part of yourself, not obviously not in a material sense, but, just in a sense of spiritually speaking, which in some ways can be way scarier than the prospect of like death in one's life. I mean, I think spiritual death is it's not just scary, but it's also confusing, like, what does that even mean, and you only know what that feels like when you go through it, just like you only know what death is once you go through it. You don't know what's on the other side until you go through it, kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely feel like this call to adventure at this point has sort of culminated in those chapters that I mentioned, which I haven't really gone into them, but it basically started with the first chapter was like me reading Ram Dass's Be Here Now after having taken psychedelics and, exposed myself to certain spiritual practices, but not in a way where I got an understanding of what was happening to me. It was very much so like an outside thing, like, oh, that stuff is over there and I'm over here. And I don't know what they're talking about, but I guess I'll do it because, like, they say meditation is helpful for focus or whatever, that sort of outside, like, there's me and then there's that perspective, occupied this whole prologue period of my life when I was sort of not quite as aware, I guess, as I am now. And I can say that confidently for sure. But Ram Dass's Be Here Now was a big seminal moment for me in recognizing, oh, holy shit, this stuff, like that kind of, like you turn around and you see everything inside out. And from the perspective that I've been, or that I was running from. And I didn't know that I was. I just felt this urgency to be running, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And when I turned around and I read that book, that was the call. That was the call. I'm forgetting who in the Bible. I think it might be Simon. When you hear it, Simon is the one who hears. And it's sort of, that's the call. Like you hear a call. And that really scared me. Certainly, I mean, I was also so interested and curious, but I was a little scared and overwhelmed because I was like, what have I been missing out on? Holy shit. I like cast aside all these different things, all these different ways of understanding the world. And now I see that they're all at my disposal to use to better myself, to enlighten, to awaken, whatever you want to call it. And now, a year and a half later, I'm in a similar position. I'm not in the same position because I'm not starting from scratch in a sense, although, I could do me some good to cultivate some beginner's mind here and just be like, yes, I am starting from scratch, So I'll take that as advice from my inner self or whatever to continue to have this beginner's mind, because I think it's really important. So anyway, I am in a place where I've been cultivating different practices. Like I certainly use mantra, which has been a huge way to basically meditate all day long without having to be like so attached to meditating all day long, like I don't have to be like in a conversation, be like, okay, hold on, I need to close my eyes and count to 10 really quick. It's not like that. I can engage in the world. That's been very important to me, to not sort of reject the world. I obviously meditate a lot. I do a lot of meditation, and that's probably my single most important practice, which I think for a lot of us it is. And some other things, some things written down, some sort of meditations on loving awareness, which is something that comes from Ram Dass, and other different things that I've tried over the course of the last year and a half. Now, that being said, it's sort of been like the way that I used to approach skateboarding. Like when I was first learning how to skateboard, I like learned how to ollie, right? So, just if you're not familiar with skateboarding, it's just jumping with the board. Then I learned how to do a 180. And so that, you can imagine it's 180 degrees. So you jump with the board 180 degrees. And I practiced that shit for so long. Like I tried to kickflip a little bit and it like I couldn't get it. And I remember waking up on my birthday like super early at like 4 a.m. and going out to try to get it, and I just couldn't do it. I had this block, and I'm seeing this block. Like I feel like what I've been working on right now are like my 180s, my heel flips, like spiritually speaking, like doing all this other stuff, and I just really want to kick flip and tray flip. And it's ironic because I ended up getting the kickflip, but it took me like a year and a half from skateboarding, when a lot of people get the kickflip like a month to 3 months in. And that's how I feel with some of the spiritual practices that I've been doing. Particularly, there's some stuff with Neville Goddard that I feel like kind of I had success with, but I also, there's something about like my foundations in Taoism that is like so like, you know, just let go and don't interfere and relax. And that not to say that the Taoist foundation is something that holds me back from basically these imaginal practices and techniques that I've been learning from Neville Goddard, but that there's a bit of like a, oh, do I do this? Do I do this? What do I focus on? I don't want to lose that. Like, it's kind of like, think of it this way. Like, if I'm working on my kickflips, I don't want to forget how to do a 180, you know? Like, my 180s are good. I want to do 180s down big stair sets, you know? I don't want to lose the 180 and learn how to kickflip and then know how to kickflip, but kind of know how to kickflip and then not be able to 180 anymore. Now, here's the thing. Here's the wisdom of it, and I'm glad I used this metaphor, is that I never really forgot how to 180. Did they get less, like, change? Yeah. But I then learned how to do a heel flip and a 180 at the same time, a frontside heel flip. Like I learned cool stuff, and it was because I was willing to let go of the simple things that I was doing originally, and I never really lost them. Nothing was ever really lost. And kind of that's where I'm at right now with this call to adventure, with this sense of, I want to learn how to tray flip. I want to learn new stuff because I know that it's going to be helpful to my life and to other people's lives. And while I have these foundations sort of in Eastern mysticism, particularly Taoism, but Buddhism certainly as well, and Hinduism as well, I'm in a place where part of accepting myself completely is accepting that I am curious and I feel a sense of wonder about power, and I don't mean power like power over people. I mean, I guess, but it's really more like power for myself, for others, for the world, in the world that is me, that I am not separate from. So, like, to me, the power is not so much like brute force and power like that, but the power of, martial arts, the power of knowing how to go with the flow and using the sail on my boat that is literally in the cover art of this podcast, like using that sail to go far and beyond what I thought possible. Understanding that if I can immerse myself in the Tao, in the flow, in the way of things, in God, in myself, in my subconscious, unconscious, whatever way that you or me need to use to understand it, that it's not even that I can do something. It's just I can see that this is what is playing out. This is what is unfolding. I would actually say that doing the podcast, even doing the stream, are extensions. I mean, even doing music when I was younger, these are all extensions of that curiosity in me and that drive to want to do something. And it's ironic because, like, so much of my spiritual practice is about not doing anything. I mean, I literally have on my wall right now, it says practice non-doing and everything will fall into place. That's from the Tao Te Ching. And I completely subscribe to that. And at the same time, part of the non-doing for me is inevitably going to be that things get done. Stuff gets done and I do things. And it's about taking a perspective on myself where this guy, Jack, is living in Western society in the United States in the 21st century. It's the year 2021. It's a capitalist society. We have all different ways of doing things. This guy, Jack, has been so conditioned, like many of his friends and loved ones, to do. And to part of the non-doing and bringing this sort of Eastern perspective and understanding to myself, to this guy, Jack, to this ego, Jack, or whatever, is recognizing that part of the fulfillment and part of the, clearing of that karmic gunk is going to mean going through those power structures, those power games, the astral worlds, the, whatever. Like, and I don't mean that it has to be in one particular way, but just doing what I want, doing what is wanted, and allowing that to happen. And I think that this gets to a point where I'm going to use a metaphor of like meditation for this. So, for example, I think that, one understanding of Eastern mysticism or, just Buddhism in a more traditional sense, conventional sense, even Hinduism, actually, in many ways, Hinduism, like certain meditative practices within Hindu practices are like, the way that the Western mind, and I say the Western mind isn't my mind, approached them was like, okay, the problem here is that I have thoughts. That's the problem. And I need to get rid of my thoughts, I need to meditate and empty my mind and get rid of the thoughts, and then I will be fine. And what you come to see, and this is particularly why like Buddhist Vipassana meditation I've found and am finding and very excited to continue to be so helpful, even if I don't do specifically Vipassana every time, but I just use that understanding, is that it's actually not about getting rid of your thoughts. That if anybody has ever thought that it's about getting rid of your thoughts, then it's a mistranslation, or at the very least a misunderstanding, because humans like are wired to have thoughts. Like that is a part of being human with this precious human life that we have. These incarnations, I know that my incarnation is about having thoughts. Or about thoughts arising. Like thoughts are a part of the incarnation. And for me to try to meditate to get rid of my thoughts, get rid of my desires, that's a huge one. To try to get rid of my desires is to fight against the desires, aka to fight against what is natural. And so to me, even though I could aspire to a place where I no longer have desire, you don't get to no desire by denying your desires. You don't get to the end of desire by rejecting your desires. The way that you get to the end of your desire is by going through them. And yeah, that's the way. And I don't mean that has to be the way for everybody. Particularly, I've definitely considered, and who knows, maybe at some point in my life I will, I don't know. But people, go into monastic traditions and, at that point you are a complete renunciate and you are rejecting your thoughts, your desires. And here's the thing though. I don't think I'm that. It doesn't seem to be that I incarnated as Jack here, that I've been incarnated, if you want to think of it that way, if I've been conditioned in my life, if I'm just a human being living in the 21st century in this part of the world with these particular conditions. Like if I went off to, go live in a monastery, which I'm sure would be amazing, but also like if I did that, I would be rejecting a big part of a natural organic process that is unfolding within this human life. And it seems to me that the real wisdom here is to recognize that there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. And there's nowhere I've got to go. Like this was the point the whole time. This was always the point. The reason I incarnated was to be right here, right now, literally and metaphorically, but definitely literally. And in that respect, it seems now silly to reject my desires and my longings. At that point, all that's going to do really is going to be like, oh, dude, you thought that the way was, at the end of my life or whatever, when I'm thinking that, oh, I won't have to reincarnate or what, however you want to think of it. I like using reincarnation for things like this. Is, at the end of my time as Jack, I'm going to, be reincarnating and I'll be this, monk that is so rejected of his desires and everything. And it'll be like, my inner part of myself will be like, oh, dude, you thought you were done, but you didn't see that the real wisdom was to allow your desires to unfold and then to let them burn off on their own rather than trying to push them away. Because if this is a huge Ram Dass thing, and for it's a lot of people, but if you're pushing something away, it's still got you. It's still got you if you're trying to push it away. Any experience, if you try to push it away, it's got you. Any experience, if you try to push it away, it's still got you. And so what do you do at that point? Well, at that point, you just sit and you just hang out in it and you kind of relax in the gunk a little bit. And you say, okay, I'm going to relax in this gunk. I'm going to let the rain pour on it. I'll let the wind come and it'll get it off slowly but surely. And there are ways to go more quickly. Don't get me wrong. There are ways to go more quickly. And I'm interested in those. And that's my call to adventure. I know this episode's been all over the place, but they're all going to be all over the place. So, it's a conversation. It's like, I can imagine, it's like I'm answering myself or you're answering me in your head, that kind of thing. But that's the call to adventure, is that I do want to speed things up, but not because it's the way that it must be done. It's because it is what I sincerely want. And when I get quiet and get quiet and get quiet, that's what arises. When I get super quiet and I allow myself to go in the places and in the directions and to sail my boat in the areas that look interesting to me, I see that I'm interested in like the cities, as they call it, like not cities because I just want power and that's the end of the story, but because I want to experience what it's like to go through the awakening process with some of the detours. Like, I want to have fun, and I see now that it's completely up to me and it's completely up to you. You have all the choice you want. Ironically, because it's like, it's only once you've relinquished any opportunity for choice or a sense of choice. Like, I came to this point where I was like, oh shit, particularly with psychedelics, like you get to this point where you're like, okay, oh shit, and you get really terrified. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Jack's not real. Jack is a conception just like anything else. Oh, fuck. It's like my ego is not real. I'm not real. And then by then you're gone. And then you're just pure awareness and you're just experiencing or your experience. And then at that point, but then you're done tripping or you come out of the meditation or whatever and you're back and you're like, wait, but I do now still sort of have this sense of identity, but it's different. And it's that point, I feel, at that point, it's totally up to you. Do whatever the fuck you want, in terms of going toward a place of unconditional love and in that direction. Because once you have that sense that of that overall picture of the way that shit works, basically, which is that you are not real in the way that you think you've been real. Nothing is real in the way you thought it was real. At that point, then it's like everything else is a cherry on top. Everything else is fun. Come from a place of love, golden rule shit. Like, that's the basic, simple golden rule shit. Like, and just enjoy the preciousness of human life. If it means suffering, if it means, you go through some sufferable, experiences, so be it. But recognize that you're doing it because ultimately deep down you want to. And that's a tough thing. That's really tough, because I'm not saying that like if you're going through something hard that you want that. I mean, at one level maybe, but it's not at a level that I feel comfortable just assuming everybody is willing to talk about and think about and accept. But I certainly am. I am in a place in my life, and I'll speak for myself, that every single thing I go through, every single thing that happens to me, every single experience I have is what I want. Is truly, truly, like deep down what I want. It's what my soul wants. It's what my soul is doing to work out its karma, to work out what it's dealing with, to work out, stuff from past lives or conditioning, however you want to think about it. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's just more that, for example, when I'm tripping and I'm, tripping like on acid or something, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I particularly, like, there were moments where I had these moments where I was like, oh, like, you look like you're, it was like I was all of a sudden not Jack looking at Jack, or both. And I was like, dude, what have you been doing? Like, you look so beat up and so tired and hurt. What has been happening to you? You know, it's that kind of thing where you're like, what happened to you? You know? And I had that perspective on myself, and I kind of responded with fear. I was like, what do you mean? Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm all cut up. I'm all messed up. Like, what have I been doing to myself? And I didn't realize, you know, the way that I was, basically using, because I'm always using my imagination. We're all using our imagination to create reality. And that's for another time. But I didn't realize what I was doing, you know, there. I didn't realize the way that I was impacting my own life and how I was in control of my life, not somebody else. And that was an important moment for me where I realized, holy shit, this is my boat. These adventures I'm taking are mine. They're not somebody else's. And at that point, you know, you're in the midst of accepting that these are all my adventure, because you don't really exist in any sort of objective sense. It's all completely subjective in my imagination. And I'm sort of just like, oh shit, what has been happening? What have I done? You know, that kind of moment of freaking out. And it's there that you kind of have this sense, and I kind of had this sense that, okay, it's time to turn the boat around. You know, it's time to flip the boat over and get it oriented right. And I talked about that a little bit in episode 2 of like the balancing acts. And that was a moment for me where it was like, okay, it's time to balance. Because if I want to go on these adventures, I got to be balanced, you know? And it's not like I've got to be balanced, like you must be balanced in order to do what you want. But, and I talked about it this last time, but it's what I want. And it's what my soul longs for, what my awareness longs for, what the karmic structures of the world are, you know, living out through this my human incarnation, you know? I realize I'm using a lot of different sort of metaphors and different spiritual teachings to kind of talk about this, but hopefully it's coming through. And if it doesn't, just be like, Jack, none of this makes sense. In which case, that's okay. A lot of it doesn't make sense to me either. All right, sip of water time. Okay. So, here's the thing. Through all this stuff, when it comes to this call to adventure, it's about recognizing that desires are a part of your incarnation, regardless of who you are. Maybe the desire is to get rid of them. Maybe that really is truly your desire. In which case, you know, go retreat, you know, totally do that. And a part of me, you know, it's like I have parts of me that want that. You know what I mean? Like they want no more desire. But I don't know if that's what I really want. That what I really want is to fulfill my desires in the sincerest way, in a way that really accounts for what I need for fulfillment, what accounts for my passion, what accounts for what matters to me and what my values are. And then after that, maybe then I'll be good to, you know, basically retreat. You know, who knows? We'll see. But at this point in my life, there's a lot that, like, I won't even say that I want to do. There's a lot that wants to be done. There's a lot of stuff that wants to come into existence, just like this podcast did, you know? And I took the approach like, well, I guess it's time for me to podcast, because I've been helping somebody with a podcast. I've been mentioning it. I've been seeing stuff about it. I've been benefiting a lot from it. So I guess it's time to do it, you know? And I think taking that approach is really helpful, at least for me, sort of taking this Taoist approach of non-doing, not that you don't do anything, but that you're not the one doing it, that you allow it to be done by your hand, but not with your, I must do it, you know, not in that way. And that if the call to adventure can be the same. And that's really important to me, particularly because as you get into different spiritual practices and traditions and teachings, like they all have different ideas about where you should be coming from with this. And I feel like for me in my life, slowing down and relaxing and understanding that everything is going to fall into place, and it's just a matter of opening myself to that, is huge. That has been really important to me. and really important for not burning out, because that's another fear is the fear of burning out and having too many, all this spiritual materialism sort of stuff, where it's like this was a book by Chogyam Trungpa, who is a teacher in the he was a Buddhist teacher that came to the U.S. After having kind of been in a somewhat of a monastic tradition in a way. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he wasn't just in the U.S. though. He studied at Oxford. He was like, he totally made his way into the Western world and had a huge, profound impact. And he talked about, he had this book called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism that I've read that really kind of like popped my bubble when I was starting to use all these different practices. And while it's important to recognize that, you don't want to get into it. I mean, you don't want to. You're going to end up in a place. I'm ending up in a place, and I've ended up in this place multiple times, where you have too many different spiritual practices to work from that all seem valid. And the problem is that they are all valid. And that the issue here is that it's just about how you use them. It's like, you could have two different people meditating, and one could be doing it one way and one another way, and one person, it has no impact on their life, and another person, it really benefits them in the ways that they want, And so in that sense, it's about not being so materially bound to the spiritual elements of what you're doing. And instead recognizing that, I mean, really, it's all in our imagination, but that our imagination is the real shit, That's kind of the idea. Yeah. Whew. This has been quite an episode. Holy shit. Is there anything I want to leave you with? God damn it. There's a lot going on with me. I hope you were able to follow this. I kind of was just ranting and ranting and ranting, but I mean, that's what this podcast is. So I'm just letting it all come out at this point. And I hope that you can let it all come out too. I mean, it's just kind of important here, Like I said, it's not about getting rid of thoughts. It's not about getting rid of your desires, unless you want to, really want to. But for me, it's not. It's just not, because if I tried to do that, I would end up with way more suffering than I started with. And it just feels like the way my life is going at this point, that it's time for me to accept this call to adventure and do what is profoundly within me to do, and what my soul desires, what as many people refer to it, what my true will is. What do I really want my life to feel like? And when all is said and done, I want to be able to close the book on this incarnation and say, I'm exhausted. This feels great to take off this, skin, this clothing, these shoes, this life, this ego. And I have no more desires. I'm fulfilled because I went through my desires. I fulfilled my desires by leaving no stone unturned, and I allowed to come out whatever needed to come out. It doesn't mean I have to do every single thing that comes to mind, but to allow everything to come to mind. Yeah. Just allow it all, just allow it. I promise you'll be good. I'll be good. We're all going to be good. All right, peeps. That's it for this one. This is the longest episode so far, about 45 minutes. Not bad. Thanks so much for bearing with me. I clearly had a lot to get out there. I might have more thoughts about this call to adventure. Maybe I'll have like a call to adventure part 2 or something. But yeah, if you have thoughts about this, questions, concerns, issues that you want to talk about, you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/jackintheway. That's like the place to engage with me in a way where I know that you care enough to, like subscribe. You know what I mean? It's $4 a month. That's like the starting thing. So it's like half of a Netflix subscription at this point. Like, it's not much, but it is a way for me to be able to feel like, okay, if you're there asking me stuff, and writing comments on like the podcast when I post it, like, that's how I know that it really matters to you and that it's really worth me talking about, as opposed to just being like this willy-nilly thing that somebody replies to my story on Instagram and is like, oh, what about this? And it's like, I appreciate that, but there's a whole other place that it comes from when you go to the place that is sort of more of a sanctuary for my content. That's how I think of the Patreon. It's like this sanctuary space. So yeah, check me out on Patreon and support if you feel so inclined. And, feel free to ask me questions anywhere, though. I don't mean to say that I'm not open. I'm absolutely open to whatever you're dealing with and what you want me to talk about. And if you want me to kind of engage with it from my own perspective, that's kind of the point of this. So check me out on Patreon, check me out wherever else. You can find me at Jack in the Way. It's Jack in the Way everywhere. So, and you probably know that if you've made it this far. So, all right. I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work you're doing on yourself. Thank you for sharing your love with the world and your light with the world and your awareness with the world, because I know you are, because we all are, Hang in there. You're going to be great. It's awesome. We got this. We got this. We got this. All right. Here's to remembering who we are. Peace.